To what degree should your organization be involved in the formulation of your strategy? Some people argue that everyone needs to be involved and that the best strategy includes everyone's input and everyone's opinion. Other people will say, no, this is a boardroom activity, and more specifically, it's the job of the CEO, because only at the top the people have the required broad perspective and overview to take the whole business into account. So, what is right? What is true? This is the topic of today's video. This is the topic for today's episode. My name is Mark Snoekers. I'm a strategy advisor and I help CEOs craft better strategy. And this topic actually comes up very often with my clients. So the question of who needs to be involved in the formulation of the strategy and how are we going to best do that. So it's not like you will be crowdsourcing your company's strategy necessarily from hundreds or thousands of employees, right? So many employees would actually be overwhelmed with questions of strategy. I mean, if you think about a new recruit, for example, a 23-year-old accountant, it's not his or her job to think about a company or a strategy of the company for a company of 100 million. So on the other hand, you don't want this to be an ivory tower exercise either. So because great ideas can come from anywhere in the business, and getting a broad sense of what your team thinks can be a source of great insight about your market and your company. And as we all know, involving the organization in the process will also make execution a lot easier later on. So how can you strike that balance between top-down only and mix of top-down and bottom-up? And here are actually 6 ways that I like to use to involve the organization in a strategy process. Number 1, ask for input on challenges and opportunities. Now, if you've been following me, you know that I take a challenge and opportunity-based approach towards strategy. So you can ask your employees about the challenges and the opportunities that they see. So that way you can tap into their expertise, you get a better understanding of what's happening on the ground. So your employees are the ones on the front line, and their insights can be really invaluable. And very often as a leadership team, the larger the organization, the further away you are actually from the action. But of course, just because an issue is raised, it doesn't mean that it's really strategic. So as a leader, you obviously have to make the decision whether something is strategic, whether it's a crucial issue, or whether it is just something trivial. So don't make the mistake that in order to please people and value their input, you evaluate or you elevate every operational problem to a strategic level. So make sure you're really addressing the strategic issues. On the other hand, many inputs, they might sound operational at first, yet they are very strategic. Maybe you remember last winter when Southwest Airlines computer systems broke down and they had to ground all their flights for a couple of days. It cost them millions of dollars and thousands of unsatisfied customers. And apparently everybody at the company had been complaining for years about the outdated systems, yet leadership never thought it was an important issue. Well, obviously until it became one. So before dismissing an idea, investigate maybe whether there is really something there. Now, second, once you have defined the strategic issues that you'd like to focus on and the opportunities that you'd like to seize as part of your strategy, you can ask the organization to give you input and ideas on how to solve the challenges and how to seize the opportunities. So once you've used the input, when you defined your most critical challenge and your highest value opportunities, you can ask the organization for ideas on how to solve them and how to seize these opportunities. Employees are very often the ones who have to deal with these issues on a daily basis, so they're very likely to have a practical solution, or at least ideas for stuff that you could do. And this is actually the most effective way also for getting ideas that the organization will actually want to implement afterwards. So instead of giving a solution top down, you give the direction with, here are the challenges and here are the opportunities that we'd like you to think about, and then you collect ideas bottom up. And again, just because you collect the ideas, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you will have to implement all of these, but you'll get an informed view of what the organization thinks and get maybe good ideas on what you could actually be doing. And if you wanted to go there, you can even ask the organization to vote on what they think, or the organization think it's the best idea. Next, number 3. So once you have a strategy, you present a draft of the strategy and ask for feedback. So this is really something that I like doing a lot. So once we got a good first draft of the strategy, as I said, we present it to a number of relevant stakeholders and we actually ask them for their feedback. So that way we can identify blind spots, we get a good sense of maybe we have overlooked some things, we get a good sense of what the organization thinks about the strategy. And again, it's a way to make sure that early on you get everybody on the same page. And as it is a draft and you present it as a draft, there are never any hard feelings. At least I haven't experienced any hard feelings if stuff is not done this way, or whether if things still have to change and pivot. So you just have to present it as a draft and discuss it as a draft and invite people to provide their opinion, because not only will this improve the quality of your strategy, it will again help make the implementation a lot easier afterwards. And the types of questions that I like to ask is, what do you like? What don't you like? What is clear? What is not clear? What's missing in your view? And then I try to dive deeper into the strategy and the feedback, obviously, that we're getting. And with one of my clients, we recently did this, and people said that what they were missing, for example, was the institution's values, and that these values had to be integrated and be part of how they actually differentiate. So in the final version, we made sure to highlight the link between the strategy and the values and how they kind of work together. So presenting a draft and getting feedback gave us the opportunity to hear what people consider important and actually then also focus on that. Another key point that came up during these feedback sessions was that people were mostly concerned with the implementation. So the strategy was fine, but they were wondering about, how are we going to implement this? What kind of resources will we get? What kind of support will we get? How can we make sure that we're actually going to implement this strategy for real? So we made sure that in the next communication on the strategy, we went into the details of how to implement it and how to support implementation. Which brings me to number 4, the fourth possibility to involve the organization. Ask about what will be important for implementation. So once you have a good idea of your strategy, you have some sense of what you'd like to do, ask the organization to give you input on what will be important for implementation, how would they go about implementation, what do people think the organization actually needs to be able to implement the strategy successful. So this empowers employees and it actually gives them a sense of ownership, which again will lead to increased engagement and commitment once you start actually implementing the strategy. So at the client I was talking about earlier, a big concern was that the organization had a history of actually starting a lot of new initiatives but not finishing them. So when we worked on the implementation plan and structure and strategic management system, as I called it, we made sure to address this point and install mechanisms to follow up, hold people accountable, and really create a capability for strategy implementation. We put in charge a strategy support team, as we called it, who was orchestrating the whole strategy implementation process and also checking around what works and what doesn't work. Fifth way to involve people in strategy, and particularly in the implementation, is to not plan every detail of your strategy, but instead provide the strategic directions and then let the organization fill in the details. So say, for example, that a key topic of your strategy is to improve the customer experience. So you let the organization figure out what should be a priority when it comes to customer experience, which area they would like to work on, and where do they see the biggest need for improvement. So in other words, you provide the direction, you tell the organization why you focus on this and what to focus on, and then you let the organization come up with the projects and initiatives they have. And finally, the sixth way of how to involve your organization is to, once you start the implementation, you are in the midst of the implementation, you need to involve everybody regularly in reviewing how your strategy is actually doing. So meaning you need to involve the organization in the evaluation of the progress that you are making. The other day, a member of an executive team said that we don't need to discuss strategy every month. And I had to politely disagree. Right? So I think that the times when you could set up your strategy and then maybe check back in 2-3 years to see how you're doing, they are over. Right? So what you need to constantly check out these 3 things. First, are we doing what we committed to? Are we actually putting the actions into place that we said we're going to do? Second, are these actions leading to the results we were hoping to see? So in other words, is the strategy working? Do we see that it works, or is it not working and we need to adjust? And third, is everybody in the organization still committed? So in other words, what's the mood regarding your strategy? So that's it for the 6 ways to involve your organization. And just want to mention two things to conclude. The first is still the question of who should be involved. I gave you 6 ways of how to involve people, but who should be actually involved? And so usually I like drawing up a list of important and relevant stakeholders. These will include people from throughout the organization, leaders, managers, but also key influencers who might not be in a management position, but nevertheless they have a big influence on their teams or certain departments because they are seen as thought leaders or they have a good social network or whatever. So who are the key influencers internally that you need to involve? It will also include customers, maybe some suppliers or other ecosystem partners that are important. So the question is who else is relevant and kind of impacted by the strategy, if you like. And it might also include a supervisory board or an owner, for example. Second, so doing all of this may seem like a lot of work. And some of you might think that's inefficient to involve so many people in a strategy process. But let me tell you that at some point you will need to involve the organization in implementation anyhow. And either you involve people up front or only when things have been decided and the implementation is starting. And the later, in my experience, the later you involve people, the higher the risk that you will face considerable resistance. And meaning you might gain some time at the front end, but if you face resistance, then you will lose a lot more time at the back end, at the back end. So the very act of asking for input and feedback will already make a huge difference and ease the implementation considerably because people will feel that they had some say in the strategy and they will feel an ownership in the strategy. So don't be afraid to involve your employees and see what kind of magic actually they can bring to the table. And ultimately, it will get you a better and a more successful strategy if you involve more opinions and you get more diverse opinions. So in summary, this approach strikes a really good balance between top down and bottom up in my experience, and it eases implementation quite a lot. So I hope this was useful. If you want more insights on creating better strategy that gets actually done and not archived, subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments how crafting a better strategy is going for you. See you next time.